Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Joining me for the second part of our conversation tonight is Professor Yemi Oke, SAN, Professor of Energy and Electricity Law, University of Lagos, as 7 states take charge of power regulation. Prof, thank you very much for staying with us on the program. Can you hear me now, sir?
I can hear you clearly. And
so I'll say,
sorry about it.
Right. So I was saying for decades, Nigeria's electricity sector was tightly centralized, with power generation and regulation firmly in the hands of the federal government. And some of your colleagues say that structure is changing with the President's Electricity Act now in effect. We have 7 states that have begun taking charge of power regulation. And they also say this marks a significant shift toward decentralization and subnational energy governance. So I was asking, what does this mean for the future of electricity supply, investment, and energy justice across Nigeria?
Again, thank you very much for having me. It means a very bright, perhaps brighter future for Nigeria and Nigerians. It's something that some of us, myself, have been in the forefront of the advocacy. It's almost 15 years now since we've been pushing for the centralization of the power sector, because that was what the Constitution actually provided for. But the electricity, the reform, electric power sector reform had contradicted the Constitution when the other side, contrary to what the Constitution provided. We're happy and glad that eventually, after strenuous battles of advocacy here and there in the studios elsewhere, we're able to have a piece of legislation that we can use to operationalize the power sector. What does it mean for Nigeria? It means good news. It means success stories. And I'm glad that the president, of course, President Tinubu, signed it within weeks of his coming to power, because he was also a victim of the federal might in the power sector, of the federated power sector. Now we have decentralized. It's actually not 11, it's actually not 7. We have 11 states that are really ready to take full charge of their regime. The sector we had was not such that could take us to where we're going. The structure we had as a country was kind of retrogressive until gladly the current administration felt that wouldn't be the way to go. The one we had was such that if there is no electricity in Kano, then Bayelsa should have no power. If there's no electricity in Ogun, then Oyo must not have. If there's no electricity in Kogi, then Abuja should not have. States should be competitive at their own levels. States should deploy their competitive advantages. A few weeks ago, I was at the National Council on Power, and these were the issues. States are now ready to really engage the power sector, both in terms of generation, transmission, and distribution, including services. And that's the way to go. You go all over the world, power sector is not federated. It's retrogressive. It can't take us anywhere. A state like Borno State now, I wouldn't be surprised if a state like Borno, despite its challenges now, is now doing megawatts trading with Togo. Why? Because it's a state that is strategically positioned to deploy strategic advantage of extensive solarization. If they're able to scale up their strategies in that regard, and they have in excess, then they can trade with other states. Mini NRC will regulate because it's trans-state, interstate transaction. So that's the way to go. Investors are going to come and partner with states as against the federal government. It's been balkanized now, and that's the way to go.
All right, Prof. You said it's been 15 years since some of you have been pushing for a structure where states are empowered to generate, transmit, distribute, and regulate electricity within their borders and submit to national oversight. And you have also confirmed that this is a move that signals a new era of subnational energy governance. But are the states truly ready for this responsibility?
Then that should not be thrown at the feet of the federal government. If a state is not ready, if state A is not ready, I'll be more than glad that state B or C will be ready. What we are going, which we'll definitely get to by the grace of God, is a level that makes the respective state of Nigeria globally competitive in their own right. A state by Bayelsa, Kogi, Oyo, Osun, Katsina, and the rest, Kano, should not wait for federal government to start to give them electricity, because it can generate. If it generates in abundance, means development will start to blossom in their states. So states can no longer wait for federal government for them to grow and develop. We've seen trends even in terms of financial autonomy, even at the level of the subnationals and local government levels. We're scaling it up if, for instance, a state like Kogi is self-sufficient in electricity. It means Kogi is going to develop far ahead than Ogun State. So Ogun State will have to start to do some catching up race to meet up with Kogi. The same thing for Bayelsa. No states in Nigeria will need to wait for another state to develop and become self-sufficient. And that's the beginning of development, actually. Economic development, prosperity for the states that are ready, of course, to seize the opportunity with full consciousness and determination.
But for the purpose of the states who are gearing up to be on this line, what criteria must states meet to assume regulatory authority from any RC? And from the information you must have gathered, why has the federal government recently paused further transfers?
Let me tell you this. One, if you look at some of the publications, some are 15 years old. I actually stated clearly that we're going to have something like Lagos State Electricity Regulatory Commission, Ogun State Electricity Regulatory Commission, Oyo State Electricity Regulatory Commission, and so on and so forth. Because I saw the trend 15 years ago. Now we're getting there. State wouldn't need anything beyond an intention to take over regulatory functions as provided both by the Constitution as amended and the Electricity Act of 2023. Then they engage the NERC, the regulator, to start to work out the modalities. A state that will signal its readiness must be sure that it's ready to attract investment. Let me just tease you. Let me just give you something that will be good news for some, not too good news for others. Our next advocacy is such that we're going to tell the federal government, start backing down and reducing funding for the power sector. Why? Because it's an item both for the federal government and state. Federal government will do its bit, state will do their bit. It will get to a level that federal government might not need to spend as much for federal assets in terms of power because states will be doing so well and states will be growing. So that's what we are saying. So federal government will also need to start to conserve their resources and channel those elsewhere because states will be self-sufficient. States are not expected to dig their hands into their budgetary allocation to fund the power sectors. No. All the states will need to be competitive, to be bankable, to attract prudent, ready, sincere investors in their respective states and deploy their strategic benefits. States like Borno will be strategically positioned for solar extensively. States like Benue and Plateau and the rest, they are naturally wind turbine. They can scale up multiple of options. States that are strategically positioned can deploy hydro. Some like Lagos, Ogun can deploy gas. The South can deploy gas. So states will need to deploy their strategic advantage in the power sector, of course, as their fixed stock. It's not a one solution fixed stock kind of thing. But the trend and the regime we are going is such that the federal government will just even not need to bother about the power sector because the state will be doing so well if they're able to get their indices and their books right.
But do you think
nobody is going to invest in the state because the state, whatever, they are not, it's not about sentiment, it's about how bankable, how prudent, a state that honors its contractual obligation, a state that is prudent in its financial management, a state that honors its contractual term, doesn't change terms of contract midway, a state that
Prof,
doesn't take...
I do apologize for interjecting, but do you think the federal government has genuine concerns or valid concerns to have paused further transfers? Because I've listened to the minister on different occasions where he says it was important to proceed with caution because the electricity market is not yet mature enough for widespread regulatory decentralization. There were other concerns. He talked about states' capacity to manage financial liabilities, prevent vandalism, regulate tariffs, and sustain investments in infrastructure. Are these valid reasons? Do state-level agencies have the technical capacity, licensing frameworks, and some have talked about tariff setting mechanisms they need, or are many still underprepared?
See, we can't blame the federal government for lack of preparedness on the part of some states.
Prof, are you there? All right.
I'm here.
Okay, please go ahead.
We can't blame the federal government if some states are not prepared. What it means is that they need to get themselves together and get set to engage in the power sector in a way that nobody should think that doing the president a favor if state A is able to get itself together and start to position itself strategically in the power sector. I don't want to mention states. For instance, states like Enugu will have nothing to fear. I'm sure Abia too will do the same thing because they are ready. And if they get to a state, neighboring states will be assessing megawatts from states like Enugu, from Abia and others, maybe Lagos. And before you know what is happening, Lagos will start to trade in megawatts with the whole of the country because power sector is business. If a state is not ready to engage in serious business of the power sector, it shouldn't, in good conscience, continue to depend on the federal government for subsidy. We're saying federal government should start to face up gradually subsidies in the power sector. A lot of Nigerians were not aware that federal government humongously has been subsidizing the power sector. Huge subsidies. We have subsidies in the petroleum sector. We have subsidies in the gas. We have subsidies in the power sector. No country will thrive that way.
All right.
These are resources that should go into other critical sectors. A lot of Nigerians will bypass. The Nigerian government has been subsidizing waste. I said it on here because we've been subsidizing generation, not actual consumption. In the cost of transmission, we have waste that is recorded, transmission losses that is recorded. Whereas the federal government will have subsidized all those megawatts that are generated. For instance, if 5,000 megawatts is generated, the federal government gives like 5% subsidy for the 5,000 megawatts. By the time it gets to the end users, the consumers, they might be getting less than 3,500 megawatts, meaning federal government will have subsidized waste to an extent that will not be beneficial to Nigerians. Who are we subsidizing? Are we subsidizing rural people? They don't have electricity. All they need is solar to light their rooms and perhaps to charge their telephones, their tiny telephone and the rest. Not humongous kind of generation that some businesses will require. We need to rethink the mathematics of the power sector, not in the interest of the federal government now, in the interest of all of us as Nigerians.
All right.
All is not well with it.
All right.
And that's what we need to do, just to restructure it.
And
that's precisely what the government does.
Because another worry is, whether or not the independent system operator unbundled from TCN will support or conflict with state-level initiatives.
Let me tell you this. An average investor will be ready to put its money in any environment that is bankable. Investors are not that sentimental. They can take their resources to Sambisa Forest. If there is an assurance that they're going to make money, if investing in Sambisa Forest will be bankable, meaning they're able to put X amount of money, naira or dollars, and they're able to make profit and recoup their money with yield, they will take their money to Sambisa Forest. That's business decision, not sentiment. So an average investor, local or foreign, will be willing to invest in any environment that is bankable. If a state like Bayelsa is ready for business in the power sector, meaning, for instance, maybe they kind of segmented an area where they can start to charge competitive tariffs. and those ones are getting left. Others will start to buy it. So investors will put their money where they're going to make profit.
So having said that, Prof, having said that,
yes.
how can states ensure regulatory independence and attract investments without interference or policy reversals at the federal level?
Let me not reveal state secrets of some states. At the National Council on Power in Borno recently, I know of states that are already even talking to players, serious industry players like some of us, consulting and press, as to how they can navigate this. A lot of investments are going on in some states. I know of a northerner who has gotten some serious investment in Oyo State. It perhaps precisely is saying. So if the saying people, Oyo State people are not ready, anybody can come from Bayelsa, from Kano, from trade. Nigeria is open for business in the power sector and other sector. And that's the way to go. We must get the country competitive for the betterment of all Nigerians. No sentiments.
All right, Prof. Because you've used Isai as an example, let me ask this question because I'm sure there are implications. So what do you consider, or what do you think are the implications of states setting their own tariffs and potential subsidy shortfalls on discos? And you must also talk about affordability. How can states balance consumer affordability with investors' returns, especially amid we're looking at currency risk, technical losses, and payment challenges?
All those challenges are not real.
They are not real.
Currency risk. If you know you are going to trade in a business where you'll be charging naira, you don't go and expose yourself to dollarized lending like we had in the power sector initially, which some of us went against. You don't need to go and expose yourself to that. You can scale things down. Because they assume they're going to, power sector was going to be like the telecoms. It's different from telecoms. 2, risk. If you are investing, for instance, in Oyo State, the investor will be, the environment will be manageable. So you can track effectively the kind of supplies you are making, distributions you are making to minimize the risk in terms of meter bypass and energy theft.
All right.
I can tell you, we still have huge cases of energy theft in Nigeria, meter bypass. And I'm telling you what I know. So if I'm investing 5 megawatts in Oyo State, for instance, I will have to devise artificial intelligence, drones, and other technologies to monitor where my megawatts are going. So that if I'm supplying 1 megawatt to this neighborhood, if there is theft, I can track it. That's technology for you.
Right,
but the big boys out there are not ready to even invest to get things done. So there will be efficiency if prudent investors are investing at the level of the state. We're not talking about mega investment now. We are doing small scale decentralized investment. 2 megawatts there, 5 here, 10 here. We're going to light up the country, and businesses will start to thrive in everywhere.
All right, Prof. Thank you very much. And it looks like the pros outweigh the cons. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, Professor Yemi Oke, SAN, Professor of Energy and Electricity Law, University of Lagos. Thank you so much for your time, sir, and thank you for always. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But before we go, let's tell you that the views and reactions of our resource persons are theirs and have no connection with TVC News. Meanwhile, you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at 12:30 a.m. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube.